everyone. Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore here. So, this is the MuseScore Café. Welcome, and our first Wednesday of the month. So this is when I do the Ask Me Anything series, and I see that questions are already arriving in the chat, and there's some posted in the community, and I'm looking forward to addressing as much as I can. Usually I manage to get to pretty much everything, and there's a lot of stuff talked about, and it's always a pretty fast-paced session. So I pinned at the top of the chat the link, the overall link to my Mastering MuseScore School, which is all these sessions where you can sign up for my online course, learn MuseScore, learn music theory, etc. So highly recommended, both to improve your own skill or what's on here. If you have scores that I would need to look at in order to answer your question, let me post that link as well. Here is that link, and I'll actually put. Every once in a while, Siri thinks I'm talking to her when I'm clearly not, and I wish I knew what I was saying that made her think that. But in any case, this is the link to where the where you can post your scores to here. So I see a question from Scott about moving notes, and I'm going to address that. And Peter has a great answer, and I'm going to demonstrate that, and because it's a great thing to know about. And so this works while you're in note input mode. So if you're in note input mode and you enter a C and then a D and then an E and then a G, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I meant to have the G before the E. Shift left switches those two notes. Now, it only works if the two notes have the same duration. In other words, if you enter a quarter note right now, let me enter a quarter note, C, and then an eighth note, D, shift left will do nothing. Why? Simply because that's harder to implement. Implementing the version where it just switched the pitches is really easy to code. Doing this where it would switch it around and put the eighth note first, then the quarter note, and then figuring out what effect that's going to have on any other staves that might have other rhythms, that would have been complicated to implement, so no one did. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it would never happen in the future. And I did once show a plugin like a couple months ago that can help with those kinds of edits. But in any case, the kind of common time when this situation would come up is when you're typing too fast and you go C, you go D, E, G, F, and oh, I meant to go F, G. And then, shift left will fix that. So that's, it's useful in at least some of the cases where it might be useful. It also only works in note input mode. If you leave note input mode, I just pressed escape. Oh, I need to hit my, there we go. My keyboard logger thing. So if you hit shift left while you're not in note input mode, of course, it just extends the selection. That's the standard shortcut in every single program. Shift left to extend the extend the selection to the left. Shift right to extend it to the right. And by the way, when you're in note input mode, shift right also will. If I press shift right now on this D, it will switch it with the E, right? So shift left and shift right will exchange with the left, exchange with the right. So let me flip back to where the questions are about this. And so, Peter, you said you had a related question. Oh, does the note shift work in tuplets? If you say it doesn't, I believe you. To be honest, I haven't tried. But I could totally believe it doesn't. And you are right. It does not, right? And it's, again, just a question of tuplets are complicated to deal with in the internal code structure of MuseScore. So there's certain things, and we're going to look at another one in a little bit, that just don't work with tuplets. So yes, they complicate life for the programmer, and so there's certain things that we just had to, for the sake of getting the feature to work at all, we just had to say, you know what, let's exclude tuplets from this feature. So unfortunately, that one doesn't work. Okay, and that, as I said, is going to come back. So remind me when I get to Dave's question about moving notes between voices that's relevant. So I also see the question. I'm just making sure I'm not missing anything else. I see Sora's question about header and footer. So how do you keep the scroll? Ah, the scroll. I don't know what you mean for the scroll. So maybe you could explain in more detail. But if I have, like here in my MuseScore Cafe, you can see I have a footer here that has a copyright message. The header has the page number. Um, I'm scrolling right now with my mouse wheel or two finger swipe on my touchpad. So two finger swipe scrolls up and down, or with shift scrolls horizontally. If I go to where the header is defined, that's in format, style, and then under header footer. This is where you define the header and footer. So you can see it's using the header is enabled, and it says different odd and even pages, and $P is the symbol for page number, and this little yellow box that's popping up here is how you would know that. But this is all the default. I don't think I customized any of this. So the page number on the right pages on the right hand side of odd pages, on the left hand side of even pages is how this is set up. Copyright message is $:copyright, and again the yellow box is desperately trying to tell me that. As I hover over it, and that's just set to be on the middle of it. But there isn't any scrolling involved, so I'm not really understanding your question, Sora. But maybe you could explain a little bit more. Um, so, uh, that yellow, yeah, that yellow thing, that yellow box. Yeah, unfortunately, it has a mind of its own, right? So what I suggest is move your dialogue towards the top of your screen, hover your mouse in that box, and don't move your cursor. And if you're lucky, it all shows up. If you're not lucky, you can go to the handbook to find the same information. So where is that information in the handbook? I don't know. Let's find out, shall we? Let's go to uh, musescore.org. And I'm just going to type /handbook. If I do this, I think it's automatically going to take me to the English page. And if your language settings on your system is set to something else, it'll take you to that version of the page. And now I'm going to do a search on this page for header, and go here, click where it says header and footer, and see, yep, there is all that information right there where it's not going to go away. So the handbook, definitely your friend. It's what documents pretty much everything in MuseScore, has most of your answers in there. So there we go. So the score I guess you mean score manager, and I'm again, Sora, not sure what you mean by that. Score manager. Is that a musescore.com thing, maybe? I'm not sure what you mean by score manager. I'm sorry. Yeah, there's nothing I can think of in MuseScore with that name. By the way, I just realized my door is not closed. So give me one moment. All right, sorry about that. Just realized that I might be annoying other people in the building. So there we go. So Dave had a couple of questions that he asked on by using the post that I created in the community, and he posted a couple things, and I'll talk about what's going on with these, and then Dave, if you're around, maybe you could explain a little more about what you mean. But the first question had to do with he wanted to basically tune some of the notes differently. So in particular, he has a score here where for whatever reason, I think it's because there was a sound font using older instruments that were tuned differently, that he wanted to retune some of the notes and had questions about how to select multiple notes. So I'm going to show you a number of ways of selecting multiple notes. So one of them we've already seen. Click a note, shift right, shift right, shift right. You can select as many notes as you want that way. This is the standard shortcut. If you think about like a text editor, that's how you would select by character, right? In any text editor, shift right selects a character at a time. Also, in any text editor, shift control right shift selects a word at a time. So, and in this case, it only goes by one line at a time. So in music, the equivalent of a word is a measure, or at least that's how MuseScore thinks of it. So shift control right selects a measure at a time. The other standard way to select things in text editors is you can click somewhere and then shift click somewhere else to select everything between there. So I see Dave has this line here, and I guess he's trying to indicate that maybe he wants to select all the notes in that range. So you could click the first note, shift click the last note, and now they're all selected. So these are lots of ways that you can select multiple things. Now, he had mentioned wanting to select all of the flute part. Well, here again, there's a standard shortcut that pretty much all programs use. Shift, in, again, all computer programs, shift plus any sort of cursor motion selects while moving. So control end is always, control end is always the shortcut to move to the end of a document, end of a thing. So control home, control end, right? So shift, if you're already at the beginning, like I am now with control home, shift while pressing control end takes you to the end and selects while you're at it. So that's how it works for text, and that's how it works for music. Click the first note, shift, control, end. Now, my keyboard doesn't have a physical end key, and I know a lot of others don't either. So on keyboards that don't have a physical end key, it's almost always FN plus right arrow. So on my keyboard, even though what you're seeing here is Control Shift End, what I'm really pressing here is Control Shift FN, all with my right hand. They're all adjacent, so I just go like this, boom, and there's Control Shift FN, and then with my right hand, boom, I hit the right arrow. So that's how I can select to the end of the score. Of course, another way would be to select the first note, and then just Control End to go to the end, and then Shift click. Oh, that actually selects the bar line, so that's actually not going to help. Never mind on that. Yeah, never mind what I was saying there. So now I'm going to see if Dave's got some additional clarification, because he definitely mentioned more complex selections. So that's a lot of them right there. That's a lot of complex selections. What if I wanted to select only the C's between here and the end of the score and only on the flute part? Well, so one thing you can do is I'm going to click here and then shift click the last measure. That selects that entire score. That's the thing that works if you can see the end of the score. So let me actually go to my MuseScore Café for a second. Theme song. If I click the first measure, and then instead of control end, I'm just going to do end. End just moves me there without selecting. Now I can see the last measure, so I can go shift click here. And now I have selected that entire staff. Now, in the case of what Dave wanted to do, he wanted to use the inspector to change the tuning of the notes. But you can see the inspector is empty right now. We don't see anything interesting in here. That's because it's not only notes that have selected here. There's also rests, and everything else in there is selected. So in order to select only the notes on that staff, click the Notes button in the inspector. Now I can find the tuning field and select, do what I want to change the tuning. So let's go back to Dave's actual example. Let's say that he wants to tune all the D's differently on this staff only. So I might right click. So here's a new thing here, and I'm showing you. You're going to right click the D and then select, and you see a couple things, all similar elements. So that will select all notes. Okay. And it really is just the notes. You can see the inspector is showing you all its nice little options there. But maybe you don't want all the notes. You just want, so again, right click and then select all similar elements in same staff. Well, now that's a way of selecting all the notes on that same staff. Maybe you find that easier than click Shift Control and notes. It's about the same amount of work either way, but if it works for you better, that's fine. But what if you don't want all the notes on that staff, just the Ds? So this time I'm going to right click a D and say select more. And this pops up a dialog that lets me make other things. So I can select just the ones that are the same pitch. That's a D. It's a D5, D in the fifth octave, sounding as C5 because it's a transposing instrument. So this will select just the D5s. And then I could also say, oh yeah, same staff. So now it's going to select just those Ds right there. So you can see that. I'm going to hit Control down now to move them down an octave and another octave so that you can see that indeed I have those are the notes that got selected. So that's a way of selecting just the notes, just notes of a given pitch if you want to tune them all differently. Or maybe you only want to select the notes between here and here. So you select, I'm going to click the E here, shift click that E to select that range. And then if I only want to select the Fs within that range, well, let's right click one of the Fs. I lost my selection. I don't think that's supposed to happen. Let me try that again. There we go. I think I didn't right click. Right click on my touchpad is 2-finger tap. And if I don't get my 2 fingers to go down at the same time, it just gets interpreted as a single click. I mean, a single left click. So I've got a range selected. Now I'm going to say select more. And I can say, I want just the Fs, or F sharps, I guess they are because of the key signature. And maybe I don't want just F sharp 5. I want all the F sharps in all octaves. So instead of same pitch, I'll say same note name, but then I'll also say only in the selection. And now that will only select the F sharps in any octave within that selection. And so there you see it. Just those 2 F sharps are selected, nothing else. So there's tons of options for selection. And if you flip over to the handbook, which is still open here, if I go back to the main page for the handbook, and then you do a search here, I'm just using Control F to find on page, selection modes. That is the name of the page that has all of the gory details on all these different ways of selecting things. Now it's not explained in great detail. It just, is right. Just get to the point. Here are the facts of the matter. So, seeing me explain it and demonstrate it could be useful, but this really has all the information. All right. So that was a lot of things about selection, and let me come back to the chat and see what we have here. Hey, I'm catching up to you. Okay, so Sora, manager in my scores. So again, I just don't know what you mean. My scores. That must be a MuseScore.com thing. That's my guess. I use it, but I'm not an expert in it, right? So let's find out. If I go to MuseScore.com, and then my scores, I think, is something that shows up in my menu here. My scores. So score manager. Okay, that's just the name of this page. So I guess my question is, well, what is your question? It shows you all your pages. It shows you all your scores. It lets you kind of search among them. Like I just want to find all my Jingle Bells versions. So it'll just find my Jingle Bells ones. And then maybe if I only want to know the ones that I've set to be public, I could select that here. And maybe looks like I can created, modified. let's see. It looks like, all right, that's only showing me ones that were modified, I guess. To be honest, I have no idea. Created, modified title, no idea. Oh, that's the sort order. This is it sorted in order of the date created, sorted in order of when it was last modified, or sorted by title? And do I want it sorted ascending or descending? And this must be how many results do I see on a page. Right now there's only 10 per page, and as you all know, I uploaded a ton of Jingle Bells scores, so it's only showing me those. What's here under action? Select scores to see the action. All right, well, let's select a score. There's a checkbox there. Ooh, that's a pretty faint checkbox, but all right, I have now selected a few scores. And under action, hey, look at this. Oh my gosh, look at that. You can add multiple scores to a set at once. I don't think I knew you could do that because I never really saw those checkboxes. They're so faint. But I don't know. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Shows you some of the things that you can do with that thing there. So there you go. So yeah, so to upload a file, you would normally do it directly from within MuseScore. You just hit the Save Online button, but you can also click the Upload button right here. So the Upload button there on the main toolbar, and you can do that regardless of whether you're on this page or any other page. So right, I could be reading something in the community, not my community, but the MuseScore community, the MuseScore.com community. So I could be here reading someone's discussion of his new composition, and I can still upload a score. It's not going to go here to the piano thing. This is just going to go to my own account. Upload always goes to your own account, no matter what page you're on. Okay, so way of searching for particular things. No, there isn't. And the thing is, what you can do is search, go to a particular measure number. So like I can say Control F is kind of the universal search shortcut. And then down at the bottom of the screen, I can type a measure number like 23, and it takes me to measure 23, or maybe 12, and it takes me to measure 12. Or I can type P3, and it takes me to page 3. Or I can type a rehearsal letter like C, and it will take me to rehearsal letter C, except this score doesn't have any rehearsal letters, so that didn't get me anywhere. But if there had been rehearsal letters, it would get me there. So that's about the only thing you can do. It might be interesting if someone were to come up with interesting ways of deciding what people might want to search for and implement a way to do it. Chances are so many people would want to search for so many different things, it would be hard to define a user interface for it. What's probably more likely is if a small number of people all had a need to find a certain thing, like search for a specific chord symbol, well, someone could write a plugin for that. So plugins as ways of getting to particular functionality that's not of general interest but might be a strong interest of a small number of people. If one of them is savvy enough to be able to write a plugin, you could probably write a plugin that would let you type a chord symbol and then find all instances of it. So that's not outside the realm of possibility. So there was another question I feel like I missed along the way. But oh yeah, metadata. Does metadata work in header, footer? You don't know how to use them. Oh, okay. Well, so the idea with the metadata is like, let's actually go to score properties. I'm going to go to File and then Score Properties. You can see all of this metadata here, including the work title, including the source, including the platform. So these are the things that are there. If I now go to my header here, or my footer, and I say that on the left, now I'll just put it in the middle so I can see the dang thing. It's this business here, $, colon, and then the word. So $, colon, and then platform, and then another colon. Boom. That's $:platform. I'm expecting that I would see the platform, except it's probably not an odd page, and that's why I don't. So let's copy the same thing down here. There it is, Linux. So $:, and then the name of the thing. And if you forget what the names are, either go to the handbook or try to trick that yellow thing into showing up there long enough that you can see what all the metadata is. But in addition to those things, you can see there's it is annoying. I agree. All those shortcut ones, $F, capital F, lowercase f. All those special ones are not things that are in score properties, but are actual properties of the file name, the last modified date. Those aren't things you set in score properties. Those are things that are part of the file system, something the operating system manages for you. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to escape out of that so I don't accidentally make a change to my score. So that's how you use them. So let's see. So sets and groups. So a set is a group of scores. Like I have a set. If I go back to my where do I get to my sets? I think I get to my sets from my profile. So that's just a ways of helping you organize your scores on that website. And I'm not, again, super familiar with the website because I really have nothing to do with it. But you can see my sets is listed there in your profile menu. And you can see all these sets that I've created. So I created a set for Christmas arrangements. This was prior to my course. These were arrangements I created last year or in previous years. So this is a set I created, and I called it Christmas arrangements. And then I added scores to it. And yeah, for more information on using this website, I guess I'd recommend going to the website and exploring a little bit more using their help files, because I'm not really the expert on this website. But, it's designed to be pretty simple. If you go to where it says My Sets, I'm guessing there's like a button somewhere to create a new set. Yeah, right there is a button that says create a set, and then you do that. And then you saw that when you're looking at your scores, you have the ability to add things to sets. Anytime you're looking at a score, there's an add to set button somewhere. So like if I look at this score here for First Noel, then I think in the little ... menu up here, oh no, right here there is in the ... menu, but there's also right there, add to set. So you can add scores to sets. Used to be the sets could only be your own scores, but now you can add other people's. You can create a set and add other people's scores to it. So you can have a set of, Bach's preludes or something in which there are, scores created by other people. So yeah, that's something about that. Groups are their version of like a forum or community kind of thing. So if you go to where it says community, you'll see all these different groups that exist for discussion on this website. So there's all these different groups, like one of them for piano. If I click the piano group, you'll see there's all these discussions and things here. Mostly it's people who have just uploaded their music there and are wanting comments on it. But yeah, some of them are more educational in nature. Some are just chat oriented. It's a whole discussion area that's existed for some many years, but I'm not really an expert on. Okay, so Patrick, you're working on creating a tool using a dashboard interface. So yeah, plugins will do that for sure. So plugins, yeah, it's possible to have a user interface on a plugin with a dashboard and all. And I see a question about hiding parts, but let me just show a plugin that uses a type of a dashboard. I mean, at least what I think of you meaning by a dashboard. It's just a user interface, right? This play panel is a dashboard. Oh, you can't see it because my face is covering it. So let me just bring up a dashboard type of interface. The duration editor plugin here that I've talked about a few weeks ago is something and maybe it's not exactly what you mean by a dashboard, but what it is, it's a window that stays open all the time while you do things. And like, I want to turn that eighth note into a quarter note. Boom, now it's a quarter note. That kind of thing, right? So that's undo those changes. It's a window that shows up and gives you controls that let you interact with your score. So yeah, if you study the plugin interface, you would be able to do quite a lot of things with it. So is it possible to hide a single part for a set number of measures? So um, I mean, I guess what I would, this is one where if you post your score over in the community, it'll help me understand a little better. But yeah, certainly. If I create a score, let me create a score for, say, no, not custom template. I'm going to use just the string quartet template. And I'll enter some notes. Don't read this clef. Nope. G. There's an E. And then a low C. All right. So I've done this, but then I'm going to put in some breaks here so that there's only so only a couple measures per system. So right now everything shows up. Let me get rid of let me put in one more break and then get rid of the rest of the score because I'm not going to need it here. I'm going to click here, Shift Control N to select to the end, Control Delete. That gets rid of them. All right. So right now all the staves are present, but if maybe the viola drops out after it drops out on the third line, it might be empty there. So there is an option. You go to Format, Style, and then on the Score tab there, Hide Empty Staves within Systems. When you click that, you notice now the viola has disappeared on that system because it's empty. Normally, that's the only reason you'd want it to go away, because it's empty. So if you have some other unusual special case where you have a staff that's not empty, but you want to not show it, that's possible to do. But like I could hide the second violin part. I'm going to press I to bring up the instruments dialog. And then I'm going to select that second violin and uncheck visible. And that makes the second violin invisible, but it does it on all staves. So it's not normally common that you would want a staff that has notes on it to be visible sometimes and not other times. So you'd have to do that by adding multiple staves and putting, hiding one of them and using hide empty staves on the other or something like that. So again, if you post the actual score, I could probably help better, but I probably won't be able to get to that today. But in any case, those are some of the options you have. You also have the ability to say, like right now, let me undo that last change. I'm going to delete a couple notes from the second violin staff. So now it disappears on that system, right? But what if you've decided, you know what, I want the viola to be hidden when it's empty, but I don't want the second violin to be hidden when empty. For whatever reason, I always want both violins present, but the viola comes and goes, and I'm going to let it show up and I'm going to let it appear and disappear. Maybe it's like a solo part. So let me show you how to do that. I'm going to go back to Format, Style, Score, turn off the Hide Empty Staves option. So now all the staves are visible again. But now I'm just going to right-click the viola staff and say Staff Part Properties and say Hide When Empty, Always. This will affect only the viola staff. So now the viola staff is hidden when it's empty. But the second violin is not hidden when it's empty. So that's often useful if you've got a staff that you're using, as I said, for a solo part, or it's an ossia staff, right? It's one that's showing an alternate way of playing some passage. You want that staff to only show up where it's present, but you want other empty saves to still show normally. So MuseScore does give you quite a few controls, but not one that specifically says, hide these measures exactly. There is kind of one. There is one if I right click, say this staff right here, this measure, I can go to measure properties, and there's a visible checkbox. Let me expand this. There's a visible checkbox for each staff, and you can see the third staff is already invisible because it was empty, but I can make the second staff invisible also, and then you just get a hole right there. So you can create some special effects that way. Usually the easier way to create those special effects is to use the cutaway option. So let me undo that change, and I'm going to delete that G, and now I'm going to right click this again and go to staff part properties and select the cutaway option. The cutaway option makes empty measures disappear. So you see those two empty measures have disappeared. This empty measure has disappeared. If you combine that with, let me right click again, and this time say hide when empty always, then the empty space disappears if the entire system is empty, but it remains for just the place where it's needed. If I insert a measure here, you can see now the cutaway really is, it does this kind of cool thing of showing measures only when they have notes. A lot of contemporary scores, some film scores and things like that are designed this way. So yeah, there's a lot of specific controls designed to help you do really common standard things. So Samuel, if there's anything else that I just showed, if that's not for writing theory exercises, yeah, you often have to do all sorts of funny special things. And I do a lot where I do that. I'll create a whole separate staff that's just for some purpose, or I do all sorts of things with extra staffs and hiding things to create the particular layouts that I need for theory exercises. And again, if you go over to the community, start a discussion there, post a score, I can show you more about things that are possible there. So Wolfram, you've got a question about tenor with 8 underneath. I'm not aware of that as being a standard thing. If it's something used in published music, though, then if it's not part of the SMUFL standard already, Google the word SMUFL, SMUFL. Hopefully you're seeing this before you leave. SMUFL. That is the name of the standard for music fonts. Make sure it gets added to the SMUFL standard. Once it's added to the SMUFL standard, MuseScore can support it. So that's the answer to the question of when there will be a tenor clef with an 8 underneath it. Yeah, because I'm not familiar with it at all. I've never heard of it being used. So let's see what else I see. Is this dangerous? If you get rid of a staff, then you want to get it back. So not sure what you mean by get rid of. If it's just about hiding it, no, it'll just come right back. If you unhide it, it comes right back. If you actually delete it, it's gone. So if I go in here and say, you know what, let's delete that staff. I'm going to go to Edit Instruments, select that second violin, and remove from score. If I hit OK, that guy's gone. The only way I'm going to get it back is undo. And of course, if I do anything else, if I delete it and then start doing something else, I'm not going to get that staff back. But certainly, if I've used hide empty staves is only hiding empty measures. If I turn it off, the empty measures come back. There's nothing lost there. So what other question did I just see? Did I just close the window? I guess I accidentally did. Let me pop it out again. You can load anytime now, chat window. All right, well, if it's going to be that way, let me close it again and come back here. So, I know I saw another question. Creating a cover or title page. Okay, so a cover or title page. Let's do that. So I've got here no title at all, right? Because when I created this score, I didn't have a title. Well, let's add a title. So I'm going to go to Add Text Title, and now I've got my title. Now, this title isn't a whole page, but all I got to do is select the frame. So when I said add text title, it created a frame to put the title in. I didn't have to do that. I could have just added the frame. So I could first, select this measure here, the first measure, and say add frames, insert vertical frame. And then I can right-click that frame and say add title. It does exactly the same thing. But this lets you add titles mid-score, so you might want to know how to do that, right? So adding the frame is something you can always do anywhere, and then adding text to that frame. But add text title will go to the beginning of your score, add a frame there if there's not one already. If I delete that text, but still have the frame, when I say add text title, it says, oh, you've already got a frame. So now it just lets me enter my title. Anyhow, you want a title page? Well, I select the frame and I add a page break. So I can either do that from the breaks and spacers palette, add a page break that way, or now you'll see it just put that title on a page by itself. Or let me undo that. The standard kind of universal page break shortcut is Control Enter. So if I select that page, that frame, and hit Control Enter, it puts a page break on it. And now I can add more text. Chances are I'll want to make this frame bigger. It's actually not that important to make the frame bigger, because if you start adding text to, like, let me add some more text to it. I'm going to add text. Blah 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 blah. Got a whole bunch of text added here, and then I can really just sort of position that text. I'm not a dragger, you probably know that, but I might use the center to get it centered, or I might use Control Arrow to move it kind of precisely by particular amounts, and then move it down or whatever, so I'm moving that text around, and it doesn't actually care. It expanded the frame to accommodate that text, but then when I move the text, it's fine. It didn't care that the text is extending beyond the frame. It won't actually matter. But yeah, if you want, you can drag the frame bigger so that it looks a little better to your eyes. The frame doesn't print. So anyhow, you can add text to that frame. You can right-click it and add more text. I can add another text block over here. And maybe this one I want to be on the right-hand side. So I right align it over here. Maybe I want to add an image. So I can say add image. And do I have any images in this folder? No, not in this folder. But, if I hunt around far enough, I'll find an image. Here's an image. So now I've got an image that's part of this title page there. So, put whatever you want on it, and then, that image there can be resized. Just click and drag it. There's also settings in the inspector for it to control whether it's the aspect ratio is locked, or whether you can stretch the image, things like that. You can also just enter the size directly. So yeah, lots of things you can do to create a title page. That said, it's not a desktop publishing program, so you're not going to see the full range of things that you would see in a desktop publishing program. If I was doing, if I really wanted a complex title page, I would do it separately, frankly. I would just create the score in MuseScore, create the title page in my favorite editing, desktop publishing type program, graphics editing program, and then I would export them both to PDF, and then use PDF SAM, PDF split and merge, or any other. There's tons of free programs out there that can help you join PDFs together. So that's actually how if I'm creating more complex layouts, I just generate the title page separately and then join them together that way. So, can you insert a frame in front of a frame? Absolutely. Select this frame, right-click it. Not right-click it. Select that frame, and then add frames, insert vertical frame. And now I got another frame. So now you can do that. It's not necessarily there's no advantage to having two separate vertical frames that I can think of. Because anything you could add to one frame, you could add to the other. But maybe something having to do with the alignment. I don't know. Yeah, probably there's some way you could make use of that fact, but I'm not thinking of it offhand. I do often put text frames, multiple text frames on a page to kind of basically separate paragraphs for me when I'm putting my educational materials together. So yes, I could just use blank lines within a single frame, but for whatever reason, I guess by using separate frames, it lets me independently control the amount of space between the frames. So I guess that's a reason. If you basically have paragraphs of information and you want to control this amount of space between them, then you can click a frame and play with the gap setting there. I'm decreasing the gap here. So what else do we have here? So are we talking about using four staves? Okay, so regarding the music masterclass, obvious you can do it however you want, but since we're in the cafe here, and I'll talk about how uh, uh, um, I'll talk about how to do this in MuseScore. If you want to create an SATB arrangement, there's basically two ways of doing that. So I hit Control N to create a new score. You can either use the SATB template, and this gives you four separate staves. Or if it's more comfortable for you to work this way, you can use the SATB closed score template. And of course, there's versions that have organ or piano also. So this time I'll use closed. No, I'm just going to use closed score. And the closed score template has only two staves. And the idea is that you enter soprano in voice 1, alto in voice 2. And then in the bottom staff, tenor in voice 1, bass in voice 2. So I personally write for voice music this way most of the time because I'm very comfortable doing this. If the music is really highly contrapuntal, so that the two parts don't relate to each other much, you might find it more convenient to work in open score format, or maybe you just are more comfortable working that way, either because you like looking at things that way, or because working in multiple voices in MuseScore is not something you're skilled at. For me, I will always find the closed score format easier to read. I can look at that and see it's a C chord. If you spread those same notes out here, C, and then E, oops, and then G, and then C. It's much harder for me to look at this and tell it's a C chord. I don't read the four staves at once nearly as well as I read two staves at once. I can do it. I can do the math on it, but it takes an extra bit of processing. And that extra bit of processing adds up if you're trying to look at every single chord. So I'd much rather look at things condensed onto two staves most of the time. But if it's super highly contrapuntal, you're writing a fugue or something like that, there's probably not much advantages. Then you get the voices start crossing, it gets to be complicated, and then maybe it's easier on four staves. But it's totally up to you, whatever you are more comfortable with. So for the cover page business, yes, anything that's on your score will be reproduced. So if I generate parts on this thing, file parts, all parts, then you see each part will have that. Now, the page breaks are considered part of the formatting, and they are not reproduced on every part automatically. So I'm going to have to add that myself. I'll have to re-add the page breaks, right? Because parts don't generally all have the same breaks because they have different music. So having the same breaks on all the parts rarely makes sense. Certainly, it rarely makes sense to have them in the same place as the score, because the score might only have 3 measures up on a page, and a part might have 50. So in any case, the breaks have to be added separately. There is a plugin that will copy score breaks to parts if you happen to be working in a format in which that makes sense. Now, if you don't want the part here, this cover page on the part, then first of all, you can make all these things invisible. Select them and press V, V, V. select everything there and press V, right? You could do that, but then you still have an empty page. Here's where the PDF idea is better, because then if you just add the cover page to the score, it's easier than removing it from all the parts this way and then having this extra useless blank page that also throws off your page numbers. So right now there's no way to say I want something that's actually present on the score but not the parts. There's just a way to make it invisible. So Sora, I see that you were saying something about needing something on another page, but again, in order for me to understand what you mean, I'd really need you to upload your score. So maybe next time. So can you reiterate the ranges for the parts? Certainly. For the typical ranges for things are soprano typically goes from C, middle C, to somewhere above that. Certainly an octave above, maybe about a third above that. Maybe as high as a fifth above that, but that's pushing it. That's kind of the range. So certainly an octave above, yeah, about a tenth above, maybe as much as a 12th above. So for alto, expect the lowest note to be maybe around a G below the staff ish, maybe an F below the staff ish. It's kind of up to you. But then, yes, up an octave certainly is safe. Going a third above that is fine. Maybe as much as a fifth above, but that high C for altos, there's a lot of altos that might struggle with that C. So this is the sopranos range. That is basically the altos range. Then tenor's range is tenor and bass are exactly the same thing, an octave lower. So tenor is the C below middle C, extending an octave, maybe a third more for sure, maybe another third. Bass, the low F for sure, another third, yeah, another third, maybe. And realistically, yeah, most basses can hit that C. Most people are capable of doing this. It's a question of comfort zones. And just Google it. Any website will give you similar information, but it's subjective because everyone's voices are different. Everyone's comfort level with pushing the extremes of the ranges are different. So I would just do a web search for this if you have trouble remembering. But it's pretty easy to remember. It's C. Middle C is the bottom note for a soprano. Tenor is an octave lower. Alto is basically halfway in between there. So alto is either the G or the F between those two C's. Or if you want to call it the F sharp, exactly halfway between. Maybe that's easier for you to think of. That's fine. I wonder if I change that to a G, if it would, like, it's telling me that F is out of range, but that's, yeah. So MuseScore apparently thinks of G as being the low note for this format here. Yeah. But yeah, somewhere in that area, I think most altos are comfortable with a low F if you're writing for a choral setting. But maybe I'm wrong. There you go. How do you move notes? How do you move between notes? Oh, yeah. Okay, and Joanne, yes, most people's ranges are bigger than just the octave or octave and a third. But yeah, it's a question of not just writing for other people, but writing for multiple people. So if you're writing for the sopranos in a choir, you're not writing for one soprano whose range is here to here, or this other soprano whose range is here to here, or another one who's here to here. You're writing for like the least common denominator. What are the notes all the sopranos can hit? So some of the sopranos are higher than others, some are lower than others. So you have to pick, stick within what all the sopranos can do. And that's why the range is, when you're writing for a choir, you typically don't want to go much beyond, say, a tenth. from the low note to about a tenth above that. That's the range you want to stick in to guarantee that all your sopranos can hit that note, because only some of your sopranos will be comfortable with that G, realistically. Okay, so Peter, moving between. So first of all, I'm not totally sure what you mean, but I have a feeling I know what you mean. When I'm in note input mode, there are shortcuts for moving between things. So right and left arrow just move left and right, right? If I hit the down arrow, it changes pitch, right? But there's shortcuts for moving between voices and moving between staves. The normal shortcut is Alt plus down. But Alt plus down doesn't work on this computer because, whoops, wait a minute. Oh, that's Control down, sorry. Alt down uh, is hard-coded to mean page down on this Chromebook here. I think there's a way of overriding it somewhere if I get deep enough into the settings, but I haven't messed with it. But Alt down will normally move you through the voices and staves. On my system, I customized it to be the left bracket. So left bracket moves me down to the E. Left bracket again moves me down to the G, that's the tenor, and then left bracket again moves me down to the C. And right bracket moves me up. So normally it's Alt plus down, Alt plus up. So those are shortcuts for moving between voices. If you go to Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts, and then I type into the search box here, I think it's Move. No, Move, it's Go To. Yeah, Go. I'm looking for what we call the commands. Go to bottom note in chord. Go to higher pitch note in chord. Go to top note in chord. Go to top staff, right? There's all these commands that all have their own slightly different shortcuts, some of which are not defined by default, some of which are. So you can think about what kind of works for you and define shortcuts that work for you. But these are the ones that I mostly use. I just use, and actually that one that I'm showing, bracket, isn't there. So that must just be called next. So let me just type next. Here we go. Next shows me next staff or voice, not go to, but next staff or voice. Why? I don't know. I didn't name them. So if you just type next, that shows you all of these commands. The go to, next. Yeah, it doesn't actually have go to higher voice of score. So you have to search for both. Next shows me next staff or voice, which is what the bracket does. But if I type go to, then I see go to higher pitch note in chord. There's no word next in there. So that shows me these other shortcuts there. So there's a whole lot of shortcuts in there that there's way more than I can keep track of, and I keep track of a lot of shortcuts. So I've defined some of these: Control Alt left bracket, Control Alt right bracket. I had forgotten because I'm sure those weren't there by default. I must have added them. But you can play with those all you want, figure out ones that work for you particularly. Low F for basses. So Michael, there, low F for basses. Yeah, it's conservative. I'm being conservative. Um, so I think a lot of textbooks will give an E as the low note for bass, as the safe low note. But realistically, yeah, if you're writing for school things, not all your basses are going to hit those E's even. But yeah, and the thing is, if you look at like Bach, he's much more conservative. He doesn't write lower notes than that very often, or a lot of choral composers don't. But modern composers tend to push ranges more. By modern, I mean last 100 years. So we're certainly more willing to push ranges in choral music now than we were. And it's also true that we're more likely to push the upper end of the soprano or the lower end of the bass, because what's the value of pushing the upper end of the tenor? You could just give that note to an alto. But pushing the lower end of the bass is great because it lets you have low bass notes that you couldn't have otherwise. So pushing the low end of the bass, pushing the upper end of the soprano are things that you might have good reason to want to do. Pushing other notes within other people's ranges is kind of pointless because that's a note someone else could have sang. And yes, there might be legitimate reasons to do it, but fewer such reasons. So I feel like I've gotten to pretty much everything that's in here, and I've been going on as long as I might want to go. So what I'm going to do is play myself out and call this good. So back to the beginning. I want to thank everyone for being here for the MuseScore Cafe today. I love doing these Ask Me Anything sessions because we get to talk about so many different aspects of using MuseScore. So I end up learning new things directly relevant to them. And then people often learn things that they didn't even know they needed to know because they didn't think to ask it, but someone else asked for them. And it's great for me because I get to maybe talk about things I wouldn't have talked about on my own. So I love doing these sessions. Thanks for being a part of this. I'll be back doing another one of these next month. But of course, I'm back here every single week, talking about some aspect of music. So again, thanks for being here. I enjoyed doing this. Check out my Mastering MuseScore School, my Mastering MuseScore community. Highly, highly, highly recommend things like my Mastering MuseScore complete online course for learning everything there is to know using MuseScore. Definitely really recommend my theory and harmony and counterpoint courses for learning much more about writing music effectively, and the community for just interacting with other musicians and learning and growing together. Lots of great stuff going on at Mastering MuseScore. Really excited for the year ahead, and thanks again, everyone.